This is a podcast from the Bugle.
Hello and welcome to Catharsis. I'm Tiff Stevenson, full-time comedian, part-time, massively unqualified therapist for this podcast only. Each week I talk to a guest about small things that are pet peeves and big things that maybe need release. Why did I make that sound like a hand job? Didn't mean to that sound like a hand job. It sounds like a happy ending. Anyway, we dive into a topical gripe and a historical beef to see if we can provide some insight, but mainly some catharsis. You can sweat the small stuff with me. This week, I want to talk about how people are behaving in the heat. Because the slightest bit of sunshine... I saw nipples on the train the other day. Nipples. A man got on with his top off. It's not even properly summer yet. And we just lose our minds instantly. And the nakedness of colleagues, like office colleagues, you know, is upsetting, isn't it? Lunch hour comes, it's straight to the nearest patch of green, even if it's a roundabout. People are rolling up their trousers, taking their tops off. And I can't eat my sandwich now I know Graham from accounts has an outie. This is not what I need to see. I went swimming in the local Lido, and it was, and I mean, you might appreciate this, my guests might appreciate this, because it's a weekend, it's the Lido, and there's nowhere to swim. It becomes human soup with Larry Londoner croutons. And I could just hear, Dave, I'm a cherub. Look, I'm a cherub. And I'm hoping that someone's not peeing in the pool and it's just someone spitting water out of their mouth down my back. So delightful. So that's my complaint this week, is what happens to common decency as soon as the sun comes out? Why can we not control ourselves? And that is a question I should probably put to our guest this week. I'm very excited to be joined by comedian, author, raconteur, and francophile, I think it's fair to say, Ian Moore.
Definitely francophile. Well, I'm French. That's how francophile I am. I'm actually French now. And your pet peeve there, your people stripping off. What I find is the first people to take their tops off are the ones who've done the homemade tattoos. Kind of faded and aggressive from drunken evenings years ago, and they're proudly parading these things like they're at the Mardi Gras in Rio or something. It's horrible. It's horrible. It's a very British thing, I think, that.
It is. They're not really doing it in France, are they?
No, absolutely not. They just don't. They don't take their clothes off. There's no need for it. There's absolutely no need for it. The French are, talking about the Lido though, the French are appallingly behaved as soon as they get near water. The French are like gremlins. If you put them anywhere near water, they become really leery. They're so cool the rest of the time, but near water they are very, very leery people.
Yes, and don't feed them after midnight.
No, constantly. They're still at dinner after midnight.
I was gonna say, unless it's wine or cheese, which can go on until the small hours of the morning. Well, thank you for joining us on the podcast, joining us all the way from France. As is the custom on this podcast, we like to begin with asking a guest about an old grudge. Something that you've been thinking about, that's under your skin, that's getting on your nerves, you wish you'd have handled differently, or maybe you handled it perfectly, but you just want to air it, get it off your chest.
Mrs. Waterworth. She was my
straight in with a name.
Straight in with. Oh, I'm pulling no punches as far as Mrs. Waterworth is concerned. I was born in the north. I was born in Blackburn, and we moved to near King's Lynn. When I was about 6, and I went to the school, the first school it was the second school I was out there. I went to about 8 different primary schools, but the second school I was there, the first day, Mrs. Waterworth put me at the back of the class and labelled me the thick northerner, and it's never ever left me. Never. It's kind of, I break out in a cold sweat during the day, and I think, what's up? What's up? And I go, yeah, Mrs. Waterworth. And I like grudges. I think grudges are quite healthy. That you not just carry them around, almost parade them like weapons. I find them really. I quite enjoy that. But Mrs. Waterworth is still. it still affects me. It really still affects me.
Were you thinking of Mrs. Waterworth yesterday when you were doing the launch of your new book? Thinking, I'll show you. I mean, her name's so close to Jobsworth. It's beautiful.
Jobsworth Waterworth, yeah. There is an element of not so much revenge, but for instance, I did a signing at a Waterstones a couple of weeks ago in Horsham, where I spent my teenage years in Horsham, and I normally I just sign my name in books when I'm in a bookshop, and I actually I wrote, "This will teach you, Mrs. Maynard, for your English A-level, shouting at me and telling me I would never make anything of myself," and just wrote like a whole essay in the front of the book. Whoever's going to buy it, think, what an angry man this person is.
I had a drama teacher who was like, yes, but it's not a career for you, is it? So TV series after TV series later, just going, yeah, take that, Mrs. Williams. You don't know what you're talking about, do you?
It's those, I think teachers plant those seeds. I think that they've got like a list when they retire. They go, yeah, upset that one. Really got under the skin of that one. It's like a legacy. They've got like a legacy list of people they've really undermined.
Yes, and then the ones that do succeed, they'll say, "Well, that's why I did it."
Exactly. I did that
because I pushed you. If it hadn't been me telling you that you were hopeless and had no future in front of you, what would you have done? What would you have done?
It worked. In a way, it worked. I'm not saying my whole life is built on some kind of revenge, but my whole life is built on some kind of revenge. I really think that I'm doing my own kind of legacy list, going, right, I've got you back, I've got you back, I've got you back.
And did she say the words? Did she say about you being Northern, or was it
Yeah,
an already?
She literally said, "You're the thick Northerner. You can go and sit at the back."
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And then did that encourage other pupils to join in on that? Do you think that opened up the possibility?
No, because I was quite feisty. Because, like I said, I think that was I was only 6, and that was my 3rd primary school already, having moved about a fair bit. So nobody tried to bully me, because I bullying in all forms I absolutely abhor, and I fight back. So nobody joined in. Nobody jumped on her bandwagon. I did lose my accent very quickly. So there must have been something going on.
Did you turn up, hey up, Mrs. Waterworth? And then a week later you were like,
right,
don't worry about it.
All right, love, you want gravy on your chips?
Wow, so that was your third in primary school?
In 2 years, yeah.
Right, that's...
Because I started in Blackburn, and we went to, I went to the primary school there, and I'd walk to school every day with my cousins who lived at the end of the road, and we were a bit of a gang. And then we moved to, like I said, to King's Lynn. And
Norfolk?
Yeah. And I got beaten up on my first day at primary school in King's Lynn because I had a funny accent. How? I mean, it's just... Unbelievable. No self-regard at all in Norfolk.
And then you moved again to Horsham.
Yeah, we moved again. We moved to Sussex. By which time I had a Norfolk accent, and I got beaten up on my first day.
It's sort of crazy, isn't it? I suppose how. Yeah, I think you have to be quite resilient because that's quite a lot of moving for that sort of age of your life.
It was, and you. I think for the first few primary schools, I did my best to fit in. But then I think by the time we got to the 5th or 6th, I was like, oh no, here we go again, and just sort of slumped in a corner, not thinking I'd be there for very long anyway. So what did it matter?
Yeah.
But you develop a really thick skin, I think.
Because I had one junior school and one high school, but I left a year before everyone else because I think mine started a year earlier. So I didn't get a final year at my primary school with all of my friends. So I always
Right.
sort of felt like I missed out on that.
Yeah. At the last primary school I went to, the entire year had just come back from whatever school trip they were on. So they were all full of these memories. So I was even more excluded.
They're bonded from there.
Yeah, completely. And I just wasn't part of it. I mean, I was only there for a year, so it didn't matter that much.
Well, this is all the classic outsider stuff that makes someone become a stand-up comedian, right?
It is. It is.
You're like, I can work any room. I've worked 6 schools. I can play any club, anywhere you want me to be. It's all right. I know how to do it. Just don't heckle me with being thick and northern, and we'll be fine.
Yeah. Don't give me that. Just sit there and I'll work you. I'll work you. Hey, you're 6. Nice. What do you do for a living?
Yeah. Where you from, pal? Which street? Let's get specific. So Mrs. Waterworth, what did she teach?
Well, it was just general, wasn't it? It was just.
She was your form tutor.
In primary school, we just had the same teacher all day. So
Right.
it would be it'd be a mix of whatever, all lessons really.
I sort of, it comes up quite often on the podcast, I guess, teachers. I think Josh Gondelman talks about his Spanish. He talked about his Spanish teacher at length and how he wasn't able to let it go. But I think it's because it's such a formative. Those are such formative years of your life that you have, they're the first time that someone outside of your family, people who just like love you unconditionally or even fight with you, but it's unconditional from the point of view if you're fighting with your brother and sister, you're going to see them the next day. Like you're not going to.
It's also that in effect, you spend more time with them than you do with your own family anyway.
Yeah.
It's like you're there from whatever it was, 8, 9 o'clock until 4 o'clock in the afternoon with the same teacher. And you might, after that, only get about 4 hours with your parents or your siblings or whatever. So they are your main, they are your world, So if they declare pretty early on that they've got very little time for you, it's like a sentence, and it does stay with you.
Yeah. Yeah, you've opted for war.
Yeah, yeah.
From day one.
You've made your viewpoint pretty clear.
Yes.
Where we know where we stand or sit at the back.
Yeah. So if you're listening, Mrs. Waterworth, if you're out there, just know.
I think she's working with the mercenaries in Ukraine at the moment.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, your old grudge. What a great one. And I'm very happy for you that you've got this fantastic career. And now Mrs. Watersworth, Jobsworth, can view it from the Ukraine.
I hope so. When she's probably, killing prisoners of war in her spare time and then sitting down to read one of my books going, I created that.
And then showing it to them going, look what I could do. The next section of the podcast we call Topical Cream. This is where we attempt to apply some balm to a stingy news story that's got you all het up, something that's happening in the news. It doesn't have to be protest just because you're in France. I wanted to see what you would bring to the table.
Well, I'm going with the government, the UK government, and just there should be at some point somebody who, like a parent, like a government parent, who just goes, "That's enough now. You're not doing anything. You're basically just lining your pockets for when you lose the next election." There should be something where somebody just throws in the towel and go, "Look, can we get back to adulthood now?" You
Yes.
know, it's so relentless that it's almost, people are almost not aware of how bad these people are and what they're doing. It's every day there's something else.
Well, you sort of get into a state of apathy because you feel like if you've been shouting about it, and if you shouted about it all the way through the pandemic, and if you I sort of say, I talk about this a bit in my current show, but I sort of say that if you stack the things that the Tories have done over the pandemic, they've got more blood on their hands than me trying to remove my moon cup, which, which, which I think if you're not furious with them at this point, then you're not paying attention, I guess. I think it's the PPE contracts that we've got this privileges committee thing with Boris. We've got, all of the people who we were told, how dare you suggest that they're either lying or spinning stuff. And people like Dominic Cummings who are now coming out and going, oh no, he lied about this. He lied about this.
Yeah.
Boris is shocking and a mess. And Brexit, it's a disaster zone. Have we got trade deals with other people? The cost of living's gone up. No, we can't do anything about the energy companies, even though elsewhere in Europe, people aren't paying.
This is the thing. I mean, France, the electricity in France has always been about 4 times the cost that it is in the UK anyway. It's a very expensive thing over here. But in the UK, it's the same with the train companies. They're run by a lot of European companies who have just gone over and gone, this is so good. We can just cream all this off, and it doesn't matter. Nobody's complaining, And I've got this theory that because obviously over here there's so many protests and so many strikes, and in a way, the French Revolution kind of ruined France and its mentality. But not having a revolution in the UK has ruined their mentality as well.
Right.
There should be like a happy medium where you can't over here.
Half a beheading.
Half a beheading. Right down the middle. A guillotine down the middle rather than across the neck. It's just if Macron had lowered the retirement age, there'd still have been strikes.
Right.
Because it's the season.
It's the sea. I like it.
It's what we do.
I like it. It's like we have PIM season and Wimbledon, and in France it's like, oh, it's protest season. Will
Absolutely.
I see you next season? Sure. What colour jacket are you going to be wearing? Yellow? Yellow? Is it going to be yellow? Well, I admire it.
Quite aggressive. Oh, I know, and I know that people admire it, but it's not. It's like, for instance, all kicking off in Paris and the bigger cities like Marseille and Lyon and Rouen as well. It wasn't about the retirement age. It's extreme politics. Like you've got Le Pen on the right and Mélenchon on the left, and Mélenchon is just as bad as Le Pen. But creating something that wasn't really a problem.
Right.
And it's just about the difficulty Macron had is that because his party is so completely new, is that it hasn't got like a media base or it hasn't got traditional supporters, so it's too easy to turn on him.
Right.
And the right and the left obviously love all that and stoke it completely. I was walking through Paris a few weeks ago, just before I was stuck in Paris actually because there was a train strike. I couldn't get home, but they were expecting big protests that evening, and it was like a ghost town. It was like a Wild West. The barriers were up, shops were shut. It was really unnerving that they knew that this would all kick off, but there's nothing you can do.
I saw a video, and I don't know if it's true, which was like literally Paris burning in the background while people are sat outside a cafe. I don't know whether that's.
I think that was fake.
It was a fake footage.
It was a fake photo.
Right,
yeah.
right.
I know that one. It's wonderfully French. A friend of mine, she sent me a picture. She was on a protest, and she had a glass of wine in her hand and a bottle of wine in the other, and walking down the middle of Paris, surrounded by violence and anger, and just pouring herself wine.
That's so funny. I'm very angry, but I'm also going to smoke this Gaulois.
Exactly that.
I will protest, but with insouciance. I deeply care, but I also don't care at the same time. Which isn't that so funny? Because that's the colliding of the two things. Because protest suggests you deeply care, but the whole French attitude is, I do not care. I'm quite cavalier about it all.
It's like they've all turned up and just gone, well, I didn't know this was going on. I'm just here, it's...
That's so funny. So, but yeah, because we were sort of like, oh, we admire it because they were like, they're going to protest and riot about the pensionable age, and we're just sort of sitting here going, oh, we'll just freeze our way through winter. That seems that seems reasonable.
We'll freeze our way through winter. We can't afford to eat, and our government ministers are literally pooing in our own rivers.
Yes.
And we're going to do nothing about it.
We'll just float on down the shit stream.
Something in the middle. Absolutely, it's so. At what point does English society go, right, do you know what, I've had enough?
Well, do you know what we'd like to do? Instead of going, let's protest, let's complain, what we like to do is police each other. So that was the yes. thing that happened. I've spoken about this before, but when the energy price caps came out and stuff, it was a lot of people coming online going, you don't know hard. Those sort of people, like, we had to share one square of chocolate between 12 of us. Like that kind of, that sort of mad. So it's people telling other people that you don't know hard, you don't understand it. We did this when I was a little. And you go, yeah, and that was crap. And you shouldn't have to do that again. And especially after you've worked your whole life to not experience hard times.
Damien Green, a Conservative MP, was talking about the sewage in rivers, and said, well, it was perfectly normal when we were growing up to swim in sewage. In sewage.
Yeah.
And you think, well, but that's not a good thing.
That's
that's not a defence.
Oh, come on, back in our day, we just swam through the shit and got on with it. That's the problem with youth today.
Didn't even bother swimming, just swallowed somebody else's shit. Didn't get wet that way.
Yeah. Just open your mouth and let the turd in. It's nutrients. Like, that's the kind of stuff where it feels so mad. It feels so mad that you kind of go, there are people that we can turn to and we can campaign, we can protest, we can speak up, but you'd rather just tell each other, oh, you don't know hard. You don't know hard. You don't know difficult. Swim in the shit. Enjoy it. Enjoy swimming in the shit. Have a nice summer. It's time to swim in the shit.
It's such a crazy defence. But it's not a defence. It's like, don't worry about it. We've really screwed up, but don't worry about it. We used to screw up all the time.
So we're going to continue. What we like in this nation is tradition. And our tradition is making a mess of it. Yeah, it just sort of feels it feels mad. And then when you go, we want to go back to traditional values, and you go, is that the kind of values you want to go back to?
Exactly. Bring back tuberculosis.
Bring back TB. Well, polio's on its way back, so
Excellent. Good old-fashioned Victorian values.
Yes, yeah. Where we used to go. In fact, that was they used to swim in the sea. The Victorians used to go to Blackpool and Brighton, and they would go for the perambulate. They called it walk. That's what they called walking. We all call it walking, mate. It's a bit of walking, isn't it? Perambulating. And then they would swim in the sea for health purposes. But that still makes me laugh, just the idea of someone swimming through it. Oh, look, William, a sheath. I like the idea of it somehow. But then they'd have these little boxed off areas, wouldn't they, for modesty, so that you wouldn't see them in their full...
Yes, they'd have tracks. didn't they? They had tracks
Yes.
going into the sea.
Yeah.
So that nobody could see. Bless the Victorians.
Yeah.
There must have been far more going on underneath the what we know of Victorians.
Yes.
There must have been
There was definitely a seedy
level
underbelly.
of perversion.
Yeah.
normally from the royal family, as far as I'm aware.
Well, listen, I'll tell you what, if you were depressed during Victorian times, you'd have, like, if you went in as a woman and you were depressed, they had a big dildo, didn't they? A big vibrator. So you'd
Right.
you'd get frigged off. If I'm depressed now, I go to the doctors. I'm going to get some Prozac. What if I want to be frigged off? Why can't we bring back the Victorian method? just a gigantic vibrator with 3 different people manning it with goggles on, going, "We need to make this woman well."
Well, you'd be lucky to get an appointment to start with, but there should if it's look if it's that simple, there should be like civic dildos like that in town centres.
Oh my God! I'm going to the
people
civic
can just...
dildo.
Yes.
I'm going to the local dildo. Me and Gladys are just popping down to the civic dildo. Oh my God. Amazing. Imagine how happy everyone would be.
Just fantastic. Such a, that is the kind of thing that draws society together.
Yeah.
Where are you going? I'm going down the civic dildo. All right, I'll see you there at 3.
Thank you for sharing your topical cream. Yeah, I fully agree. I'm with you. And so I'm going to take some of the French method, but not all of it. I'm definitely taking the drinking wine while you're on it, though.
Oh, well, this is the only way to protest.
Yeah, wine and cigarettes. This is the section of the podcast where we ask for an unpopular opinion, a thing that everyone hates but you love, or vice versa.
Well, we've kind of covered that really, because it's the idea of the French, how
So
they
my
are
idea of the
regarded.
French, my romanticised. My grandmother was half French,
Right.
but my romanticised idea of French people, the reality versus how people think French people are.
Yeah, I think that there's obviously there's centuries of antipathy that has grown up between the British. No, sorry, not the British, the English and the French. It's because the Welsh, the Irish, and the Scots adore the French, I think. But there's this idea that the French are filthy, work shy, yet at the same time great lovers. I don't think you can be filthy, work shy, and still be a great lover. But there's this kind of it doesn't
Unless you're
work.
into
I've
someone
tried it.
Unless you're into somebody who hasn't washed and can't be bothered in the sack.
Yeah, exactly. I remember before we moved to France, we were out walking the dog one day, and we saw this guy who we regularly saw walking his dog, and we said, "Oh, we won't see you again. We're moving to France," and he said, France is great. It's just full of French people," and he wasn't the first person to say that. This idea that that France is a wonderful place if you got rid of all the people in it and put English people in it, then it would be somehow better. I was sitting, as I tend to do, I sit outside the local bar and just read or whatever. And I was there one time, and this obviously English tourists walked past, and this woman said, it's such a beautiful little town. What it needs though is a right good chippy. No, it doesn't. No, it really doesn't. Go home for that.
We do not want your English fat chips.
No, you put gravy. You put gravy on your chips. No, put wine on your chips. It's because I'm French and I'm English. I kind of and my son had this as well, because my eldest son, was born in the UK, but we moved here when he was 4, and he, for a lot of the time, he was at school, he was quite aggressively English. He was very proud of where he came from and proud to be different to everybody else in the village school. Aggressively so, he would get into fight, typically English. But then when Brexit happened, he completely changed. He was practically wearing striped shirts with onions around his neck. I'm so French now. It's a very distinct attitude. The French see themselves almost as a race rather than a nationality.
Right.
And I love that. I love that. And the idea that I remember a well-known comic saying to me once, the French hate us, don't they? And no, the French don't hate the English, not one bit. I don't think most of them even know the English exist. They really don't care. They don't give you any thought at all. They're not interested. It's
Yes.
not that they hate you.
They're not thinking
you're just
about
not
English. The English. They're just being French.
Yes.
They're just busy being liberté, égalité, fraternité, sororité. Let's bring the women in.
It's a full-time job being French. It's not something you take lightly. There are certain, I think, criteria that you have to match up to every day.
I think we see that glamour. We see that that kind of like shabby chic of French. No matter what it is, it's chic, even if it's shabby, because you've got chateau everywhere that people can just buy. For like the mortgage on a house that you would have in London, you can just.
Why do you think I'm here? We sold our little box in Crawley and bought, a dream property. It's a wonderful country.
Well, and also, so your wife is French, right?
Well, no, I made that up.
Okay.
She's half French. My mother-in-law's French, but you can't go on stage as a comic and start talking about your mother-in-law. You just can't.
With that,
you can't. Not anymore. There's too much baggage.
This is a French Bernard Manning.
Monsieur Manning.
Monsieur Manning, yes. My mother-in-law. I think the French don't hate the English. I think they like it when you attempt to integrate, speak the language, and because barging in and speaking English in France is quite entitled.
Oh yeah, oh definitely. I mean, and there's also the reverse of that, and the old saw about speaking French and they will reply in English, which is
right,
which is annoying. But then I was in a French restaurant in London about 3 weeks ago, and he was speaking to me in English and I was replying in French. So you kind of get the inverse.
Right. I like to try, even when I was in Belgium at the end of last year. So I was sort of trying in the French places, and I'm aware that there's, regional, like the Belgian accent is going to be different as well. But and then there's obviously the Flemish bit that I can't.
Nobody speaks that anymore, not even the Flems.
But I was trying, and then I was just having to ask them to slow down, and I was giving it a shot. I think that's the thing, is if you're willing to like try, and they're like, oh, it's nice that you tried, but I think this kind of sort of demand that English people can definitely have, traveling around the world and going, well, just English, isn't it? It's English, and you're like, good God, no, you're not in England now. So just attempt to learn a couple of phrases just to help you along.
Just the basics. Just the basics. Don't say hello. Don't say thank you. Say bonjour. Say merci. It's not.
Yeah.
It's really not that difficult. It's just the idea that you can just walk into a boulangerie and just say, point at something and then say thank you in English.
Yeah.
It's so rude.
Yes.
It's so rude.
Yeah.
And they do love it when you make the effort. Of course,
Je voudrais un pain au chocolat.
Yeah. I've been here 18 years. They're getting tired of my efforts. I think. To get French nationality, I had to do language tests, and it was an appalling. It was an appalling exercise that I have still, even now, I've no idea how I got through that. I mean, I am essentially fluent now, but I remember my wife said, we were filling out the application form to take the French test, and she said, why don't we just put you down as a mute?
How long has it taken you to get to fluency, do you think?
Well, I don't like to admit that there's fluency, because if people think you're fluent, they're going to talk to you, and I'm not keen. I'm not keen on that.
Immersion is the best way to learn a language. I think it is to be immersed in a society or in a place, and you don't have any choice.
No, exactly. It kind of, I've tried over the years, cause the thing is, obviously, as comedians, we're used to, if we're not being understood, we can't do our job. So I found it really hard that I had to kind of suppress my natural instincts to be sarcastic or whatever, because I didn't have the language skills to be able to do that.
Yes.
And even when I tried, sometimes it was a disaster. Many years ago, we were having the loft converted into a bedroom. This was the day after the World Cup final in 2006, when Zinedine Zidane got sent off for headbutting.
Yes, I remember this.
The Italian player. And the builders were upstairs, and I went in and said hello, and I went, that's Zidane, he's nuts, isn't he? And they downed tools. My wife had to persuade them to come back. I was just trying to be funny. I wasn't slagging him off. I was just saying he's a bit mad, isn't he? And they just took it so badly, and my wife had to persuade them to come back and carry on.
I go, he's English, he doesn't understand, he doesn't know what he's saying. He doesn't know what he's saying. Before we go, a couple of things. I'd like to get into a listener problem, because I do a section of the podcast called Angry Aunt, which is Excellent. Where people send me their issues. And I have a couple here. The first one I just want to put across says, Dear Angry Aunt, is it okay for people to use their Zoom cameras like bathroom mirrors? I don't want to see anyone poking their eyeballs or sticking a swab up their nostrils or showing me that judgy face where they consider if their eyebrows are on straight. So here's one of the things I found during lockdown, when the Zoom first started, and we're on a Zoom now. Men are so unaware of their angles. Women, I think, we take photos, like, I'm always like, don't be shy, go high. Put the men during those seem to think the most flattering angle is directly up the nose.
I know exactly what you mean.
In full view of nostril hair.
Yeah.
So I think it's that in the middle of being on a conference on a Zoom with lots of people, that there's someone there just checking how they look the entire time.
I think I've not suffered from that, because I'm so vain. I'm aware of my angles at all times. My laptop at the moment is I've got a specific stand that I bought just so that it's at the right angle, so you don't see all 12 of my chins.
Yes,
that's the thing.
We're in showbiz, so we're always aware of the angles. But
right.
I find that it can be distracting. I'm like, if you're going to do that, just switch your camera off. But if you're going to be pottering about and doing, I've got this bookshelf behind me. I could be taking things off. I could be flicking, because what it says to you is the person's not engaged with what you're saying. So I don't think it is okay. I mean, she's asking, is it okay? I think it's fine to use your camera, your phone camera, as a mirror. I'll often do that on the train to check myself out. But I think in the midst of a phone call, if you're there just like doing your eyebrows and like checking yourself out, I'm going to be raging.
Well, also buy a mirror.
Yeah.
There's, what I think, like you're on a tube or a train, and women are putting on full makeup on the tube or the train, even though it's rattling around. And then I was in a tube once, and this woman started putting hairspray
Cloud of hairspray.
We were all being maced.
See, I do my makeup on the train and I've got it down to such a fine art. I'm like, if you think you've seen skill at the Cirque du Soleil, you haven't seen me putting on eyeliner as a train breaks into the station. That is some higher wire stuff. I could take an eye out. I'm very skilled at this. But I do think there is a line. I think, I don't want to see you doing ablutions. I don't want to see anything that should be done in... I don't want to see tweezing. I don't want to see shaving. I don't want to see... I've seen someone, I think even putting in eye drops, where you see like people pulling it, that you see someone rolling their eyelid back is a bit much.
Well, yeah, I can't
clipping nails, clipping and filing, anything that has skin or body detritus.
Nasal hair.
Floating into you're filing your nails, like bits of your dead fingernail are just like sort of flying across the tube carriage and landing on me. I don't think that's okay.
No,
but I don't mind. I don't mind a mascara or seeing someone put lipstick on. I think hairspray is too much.
I think there's something quite attractive about a woman who carries around a small mirror as well.
Right.
Because it's kind of old Hollywood chic, French chic maybe.
Yes.
That you have that kind of, and you just take out a pocket mirror like that.
And
Men can't do that.
Yes. Yeah, can you imagine how vain you look if you just the thought of it, seeing a man take out a mirror and just sort of
get the tweezers and take some nasal hair. It doesn't work. It's not the same effect.
The husband went to the Turkish barbers recently and had, after his cut, they do the nose wax, which is where it's two big cotton buds with wax on them that are then shoved up there, and then they just pull them out in a oneer, and it looks eye-watering.
No, thanks. No. You're just going to have to live with my ZZ Top attached moustache, I'm afraid.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Ian. Before you go, I would like to find out if you have anything to plug. Obviously, there's a book, so tell our listeners where they can catch you, where they can buy the book, and what you've got coming up.
Okay, Death at the Chateau, which is the third in the Follet Valley series, came out yesterday, June the 1st, and it's in all bookshops, not just good ones. It's in all bookshops.
Bad ones, middling,
especially bad ones. Mediocre bookshops specialise in it, and it's on Audible as well. And I've read that. And then I've got another series starting in October, which is more serious. The Death at the Chateau is a kind of what it is. It's comedy, cosy crime. Whereas the Man Who Didn't Burn, as you can guess by the title, is not so funny.
Yes,
it's a more serious crime. But that's what's coming up, and I'll be sort of zipping about signings and all of that.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. So go check Ian out. I would like to say I am doing a work in progress at the Edinburgh Fringe for 1 week only, midday at the Monkey Barrel. You can catch me. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and we will see you next time.
You can listen to other programmes from The Bugle, including The Bugle, Catharsis, Tiny Revolutions, Top Stories, and The Gargle, wherever you find your podcasts.